Greetings. I'm Frank Hodge, Dean of the Foster School of Business at the University of Washington. Today, I'm interviewing Tod Burwell, President and CEO of the Bankers Association for Finance and Trade, and a board member of the University of Washington's Global Bankers Program. Tod has over 30 years of experience in the banking industry and has worked at leading institutions such as the Bankers Trust, Deutsche Bank, and JP Morgan. Welcome, Tod.
Thanks, Frank. It's great to be with you today.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here today. I'd like to start with your extensive experience in the banking industry. What have you seen over those 30 years and how have things changed?
So it's interesting. I actually am one of the strange people who knew he wanted to be a banker when I was 5 years old. So I've actually had a chance to see a lot of things change. So what originally drew me to the business and to the industry was I thought it was just exciting. And banking was always a very, very sexy type of job. And so if I go back, I joined the industry in the late 80s, right? And so 1987 was when the movie Wall Street came out. That was probably sort of the height of sexiness of working on Wall Street in the industry. And there was a lot of energy and there was a lot of excitement. Unbeknownst to me, also in 1987, we had a crash. So the industry went through a lot of changes just in that 1 year, and which ended up with me really being more in the commercial banking and international banking space, more so than the investment banking space. But if I go back to that time in the late 80s, early 90s, there were a lot of sort of new innovations in finance. Financial engineering was really, really creative. It was still a very, very cutting edge place to be. Fast forward to 2008, and we went through probably the lowest point I've seen over that 30 years. And the financial crisis really left a very sore black eye on the industry, if you will. The perception was that banking was actually responsible for a lot of economic pain. And it became not such a wonderful and sexy career. And so if we now fast forward 10 years, I think have been spent trying to repair the reputation of the industry. And we're now in a place where I think the world recognizes that banking is still the wheels of commerce. No matter what country you're in, and no matter what it is you do, you need finance and financing and banking types of services in order for wealth to grow.
You've seen a tremendous amount of both ups and downs in the banking industry over your time. What would you like to see over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, and then why?
Yeah. So one thing I think is constant. So if I go back to those 30 years ago, and I think about where we are now, fundamentally, the industry is still about the same core things, which is being a place to store and secure wealth in a safe way. It's about being able to transfer wealth in an efficient way. And it's about being able to leverage that wealth to generate more wealth. And I'd say if I think about the future, I think those core things are going to be the same. What the industry is really challenged with now is how to be more efficient and in being able to sort of shed some of the legacy cost structures that have slowed down perhaps some of the innovation. I think that's one of the challenges. But it's going to have to reinvent itself, continue to transform itself through the innovation. And in doing so, attract talent that's going to help it sort of grow through the next life cycle.
And I'll ask you a follow-up on that talent question, because you said you had an interest in banking way back when you were 5 years old. How do you expect to attract the next generation of bankers?
Yeah, so I currently have a couple of kids that are university age, and so they just listening to what it is that interests them and what they want to do in life, it is different. Their priorities are different than what my priorities were.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we as bankers and we in the banking industry have to meet the next generation where they are. We need to understand the things that are of importance to them, the things that they place high value on, and then demonstrate how this business can accommodate those. One of the things that I always found interesting is that the commercial banking part of the business has always flown below the radar. But what I learned was that just by being exposed to business in different parts of the world, seeing how big businesses operate, small businesses operate, understanding how to connect people across the entire world, there's a never-ending path of learning that I've had in this part of the business. And I don't think that part is very well known. And we need to figure out how to better tell that story to attract people, because I think there's a story there to tell.
And we're certainly seeing that in our students. It's that growth mindset, that continuous learning that draws them in and attracts them to a profession.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You joined BAFT in 2011, almost 10 years ago. As president and CEO, what do you find most rewarding and most challenging about your role?
So I think the most rewarding part was something a little bit unexpected, which is I get to be everybody's friend. So as a banker, you know people in the industry, your colleagues, but you're still competitors. So as the industry representative, I actually get a window into every institution to learn how they view the industry, how they view opportunities. I get to meet many more people that I otherwise probably would not have known and have conversations that I otherwise wouldn't have. And I think that's helped my creative thought process and has helped me to become a little bit more strategic because I get to see things from different angles. Mm-hmm. I think one of the most challenging things for me personally is having been a banker for most of my career. When you run a nonprofit organization, figuring out the measurements of success are more difficult because you're not measured so much by profitability. And as the industry advocate, you can spend years trying to work to influence a policy or a change for long-term good, and that policy change may never come. So it's very, very challenging to try to figure out how well you're doing what you're trying to do.
And Todd, one of the very valuable services that BAFT provides is all of the conferences and forums and workshops that you do around the globe. Can you talk a little bit about how they have been affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, so if I can be 100% honest, this has been an absolute gut punch for us just to put into perspective our particular business model relies on conferences and industry events and forums and things of that nature for about 45% of our funding. Mm-hmm. So if all of a sudden you say we're not doing any of those for a year, that becomes an incredible challenge. In addition to that, because of the pandemic, because of historically low interest rates, many of our members are having significant expense challenges right now. And their expenses are also our revenue opportunities. Yeah. So the pandemic in a couple of ways has really forced us to rethink and to reinvent our business model and to figure out how to be more valuable in a way that's much more cost efficient to our members. So the content that we have been delivering has been delivered through electronic platforms like this and others. But it changes the business model for how we can generate revenue. Our attendance at programs has probably increased 3- or 4-fold. In the last 10 virtual programs, we've had about 2,500 participants to those programs. And so we get people from geographies that otherwise might not have been able to travel to an in-person program. So in that way, it's good because we get more exposure.
And we found the same, Todd. We run a state of the economy here at the University of Washington, and we used to do it in person and get just over 100 people. When we did it remotely, we got over 1,000 people to sign up. And it just shows how much interest there is in what you are providing through BAFT if you don't have to travel to obtain those valuable services.
Yeah, yeah. But there is, I will say, and this is almost to a person when I talk to them, we've facilitated virtual networking events and things like that, but I think there is just a human instinct to want to have that person-to-person contact. So I think on the other side of this pandemic, we'll have the lessons learned from how to deliver some of these solutions more effectively through virtual means. But there will be a desire by many, I'm sure, just to see people in the same room and to engage with them personally.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that in the educational space. Our students, they can learn basic skills and we can push information to them in a remote environment. It's just not the same as being in the classroom and interacting in those side conversations. So
yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I want to turn and talk about the University of Washington's Global Bankers Program, which has been running for approximately 45 years. As a board member of that program, you play an important role in shaping the impact it has on those who attend and the work that they do. In your opinion, what is the value that this program provides to the industry, and how do you see it changing over the next couple of years?
Sure. So I had the fortune as I was coming up in my career to actually go through an executive MBA program. And there are some parallels that I can think about from my experience for that and the Global Bankers Program, which is a different type of executive education program. But I think easily the most valuable component of this is being able to step outside of the day-to-day challenges that you're trying to execute as a leader and as a manager, to engage with people who are coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, in many cases, different roles, and to approach problem solving in a way that's unnatural. And that can, in my opinion, really help change the way that you see the world. It helps your creative thinking. It may cause you to challenge some of your fundamental beliefs about how to go about solving problems, because some of the same problems we're trying to solve other people are having, and they may have done them in a different way. So through a program like this, being able to engage collaboratively with people who you might otherwise think of as competitors, to collectively problem solve, I think it helps you personally as an individual, and then when you go back to your organization, it will make you more valuable to that organization. So it's a phenomenal opportunity in that regard.
Yeah, in essence, it's developing a mindset. It's that toolbox that allows you to attack real-world unstructured problems in unique ways, and that kind of tool chest is very valuable as you go back to your individual enterprises.
Yes. Yeah. And I also think that and this was, again, kind of going back to my experience in an executive MBA program. So as bankers, every day we sort of surround ourselves with other bankers and maybe some of our corporate clients or others. When you step outside of that for a minute in a more academic approach, it also causes you to look at things through a different lens. So if you look at the structure of the Global Bankers Program, there's a balance between taking an academic approach to looking at problems and taking a practical approach, because there are real business leaders that are coming at this. And I think the blend of those two things also gives you a dimension that you don't typically get in just your day-to-day training and leadership.
In the Global Bankers Program, the target number of years for experience is roughly 10. If you take yourself back to when you had 10 years of experience, and then think of the leadership roles that you have today, what advice would you give the individual you were at 10 years of experience based on your experiences today?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So again, I guess maybe just put a little context to this. I had about 7 years of experience when I started the executive program that I started. And so I had about 9 years when I came out. So if I think of myself in that 10-year time zone, and try to apply some learnings, I'd say number one, invest in your network. I cannot understate this and underscore this enough, because one of the values of the Global Bankers Program is the network that you build, but being able to invest in that network and every other network that you build will help accelerate you through your career in a way that you may not be able to appreciate 10 years in. So that's sort of the first. I think one of the others is, and this is somewhat of a, just sort of a personal way that I approach it. When you're 10 years in, you think the sky is the limit and you probably have significant career aspirations. Sometimes we can fall into the trap of always thinking about the next job. But I would say approach your next job, or I should say approach your next job as how it's going to get you to the next job. Work your job as if it's the last job that will define your legacy. And always follow through in a way that it will define your legacy. Mm-hmm. And I think in my own experience, when I've been able to do both of those things, it's tended to work out very well for me as well as for the company.
Yeah, and I found that to be especially true for myself. I started off working in Japan for a forest products company, so I would have never in a million years said, well, I'm going to be the dean of a major business school. So you focus on what you're doing in the moment with eyes towards the future and opportunities, and then just take advantage of what presents itself as time goes by.
Yeah. So, just as an aside, when I've interviewed people for jobs that I was hiring, there's typically only one question that I ask every single candidate, which is, what is it that you want to do? Because as a hiring manager, I really want to understand where they see themselves on the other side of the job that I'm actually hiring for. Mm-hmm. And it helps me to try to give them the experience in the job that they're going to do that will keep them interested, keep them excited, and build out their skill set to where when they're ready for that next step, they feel like they've actually gained more experience and put more tools in their toolkit.
Yeah, that's a great question. My final question to you, Todd. The Global Bankers Program is all about helping bankers from around the world develop their leadership skills. How do you develop your leadership skills on a daily or a weekly or a monthly basis?
Yeah, so I was the son of two educators, and my father, he lived and breathed education. And I think one of the things that I got from him is you never stop learning. Even to this day, our conversations go on for hours because each of us never stops learning. So what I try to do is to be a sponge and absorb everything that I can with as much of an open mind as I can to help me sort of level set what I may think is true, to really test that on a regular basis to see, is it really true? Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say is you have to be brutally honest with yourself about what your strengths and opportunities are as a leader. And for your strengths, be proud of those strengths, leverage those strengths, and use those strengths not just for yourself, but for the good of the entity that you're working. And for the areas where you have opportunities, to model the behavior that you aspire to for whatever those developmental opportunities are. You really need to see who is it that you think does an outstanding job with that, and how do I become more like that person and how they do.
Which goes to the role model piece. The first point you mentioned really resonates with me. I have a plaque behind me that says, I am always learning. It's a quote from Michelangelo. And I think that's the mentality you have to have, that every day presents opportunities to grow and learn. It's that growth mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time today, Tod,
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
and be safe.
Okay. You too.